tariffs. What's going on with China and the deal that Trump has announced to everyone? Trump basically said, we got a deal. We get the deal with the rare earth. We get the deal with the Chinese students. And I'm going to show you what this really means. I'm going to show you what's going on in the background so that you could see ultimately what it really means. And it's going to shock you. Like everything else, we've heard the news, right? The deal is you're not here to listen to the news. You're here to understand what is going on. You need to understand what is going on because otherwise you cannot make a decision about your portfolio, your life, your livelihood, and where you're going to live. You need to understand that this could become an actual problem. Why? Let's start with what we found out today. We currently have a deal with China, right? That's what Trump said in his opening statement, in his Twitter handle. And basically, well, he's over at not at Twitter anymore. He's over at his own social media, But anyway, the point is that he's talking about on Truth to Social. He's talking about essentially that he has a deal with China. Well, actually, China is putting a 6-month limit on rare earth export licenses. So let's get the facts straight first of all. What is a big deal with this rare earth? Why is it that we really need to know what's going on with the rare earth? Well, you need to understand because basically rare earths are the bunch of materials, right? It's like very, very complex materials that essentially allows for the manufacturing of defense system, clean energy tech, high-tech products, your smartphone, your military equipment, your semiconductor. You need, you need it in order to get these products out of the production floor into people's hands. But you need those documents. Okay. Hey, Annie, how you doing? So what do we mean by that? Well, basically, they have a framework, right? The thing is, China, and listen to me, this is important for you to understand the rest of the story. China controls 60 to 70% of the mining globally of these rare earths, right? And 90% of the processing capacity, which rely on imports for nearly all rare earth and comes from China. U.S. relies on imports. Without those material, those rare earth. Yes, I am a teacher. Well, I'm a professor actually, and I'm also an investor. I did a bunch of things. The point is this: without it, you got to import the stuff, and you get it mostly from China. So that's why you need a deal with China. You have no choice. Okay. And basically, China said later on, well, hold on. We don't have a deal. Right? We have a deal, but basically we are putting a 6-month limit on this thing. Right? This is done. We're not signing anything. We have an understanding. We're going to negotiate. Now, the point is this: you need to understand that we need it. Fine, we all know that, right? But what's really going on in the background, right? Because essentially, you need to realize that when Trump got elected, there were really two camps, right? There were the Musk, Vance, smart people camp. These people are smart, meaning that they have certain visions. They know how to elaborate a thought. They know what to talk about. They've got some experience. And then you've got the other side. You have Navarro, right? Navarro, and basically, for that you understand, that Peter Navarro essentially wrote a book on China, right? And he's the one with Fortress America, with American Empire, right? So you have two camps. At the beginning, I think it was great. Vance came out, Musk came out, and basically said, you know what, we're going to save some money. The Doge business, Vince went to Europe, said, listen, we're not going to be protecting you forever and spending all that kind of money on you. We want to spend on the U.S. Makes sense. you're big boys, you defend yourself a little bit. Makes sense. Okay? So you had all these things going. Because you have to understand that these people, I mean, you may hear the news and you're digesting the news all day long, and they're telling you what is going on, and this is what's happening, but you need to also understand. You need to analyze what it means, what's going on in the background. So what I'm telling you is there were two camps. There were the Musk, Vance type of camp, and then you have the Navarro camp, right? At the beginning, that's what you had from the first two guys, right? We're gonna cut some cost. We're gonna tell Europe to spend their own money. We're gonna be more efficient. We're gonna cut taxes. We're gonna cut all the requirements and everything having to make the government runs better. And the market liked that. They liked the idea we're gonna do all these things. But then there was the other camp, the camp with the tariffs, the camp with Fortress America. That's the Navarro camp. And that camp, now you have to understand, Navarro is not this guy that's walking in the street that Trump picked up on, right? When Navarro went, he went to jail for Trump, right? He was commissioned for the January 6th commission by Congress, and he didn't say nothing. He didn't want to talk about it. He went to jail for Trump. And Trump, you may like the guy, you may not like the guy, but he favors and he welcomes the fact that you're faithful to him, and he's rewarding him, and he's saying, you know what do you think we should do? I think what we should do, Mr. President, is that we have to bring the manufacturing in the U.S. We have to stop sending the stuff overseas. We have to stop having a trade deficit, which, I mean, the guy went to Harvard. He's not a stupid man, right? He's right. Trade deficit is not a good thing. Because when you have a trade deficit, it means that they are importing a lot more stuff than you are exporting. And usually what happens is that you lose control of your manufacturing, you lose control of your economy, you become lazy, right? Because you're exporting your dollars and you're bringing in, you're making them rich, but you're not building anything anymore. So, and of course, he has a beef against China, and he basically saying, and on top of that, I think he wrote a book. He wrote a book called, the China syndrome or something having to do with China. Basically, he doesn't like China. So what happens? He brings the guy in, and there was a tug of war between these two groups. And obviously, he won out, Navarro. And he said, Mr. President, let's tax the hell out of all these people. And that's why you saw this. I wouldn't call it ridiculous, but I mean, we had, trying to make tariff increases over 100 countries. Don't forget, that was May 9th, 90 days, May, June, July, August 9th. How many deals do we actually have? I think we have some sort of deal with the UK. That's sealed and delivered. With China, I'm not so sure. Europe, no. So that's a lot of time, a lot of deals in a certain amount of time. So that's going to take a while. The point is at this point, we have a situation where one camp is winning out over the other. How could I tell you that? Look what they did to Elon Musk. They basically kick him out. They basically did not want to hear anything having to do with saving money, right? We're not trying to save money in the U.S. with this, with the Doge anymore. That it was good at one point. We're saving money here. He was on TV and everything else. You're going to get $5,000 refund on your taxes, and then that camp lost out. I mean, he lost out in terms of his business, and then of course the cherry on top is when Trump comes out with the big beautiful bill, which is going to add an additional, $4 trillion to the debt, and that was too much for Musk. So we're not saving money anymore. What are we doing? We're just spending more and borrowing all over again. I thought you brought me to be the efficiency expert. I guess we're not going to be efficient anymore. That's what happened. Okay, so that's kind of the situation right now with these two camps. Now, what I have to tell you is the thing is the way Navarro and Trump went about with the tariffs He didn't try to negotiate with China. He's trying to coerce China into forcing them to basically do a deal with them. Now, you have to understand that China, I mean, obviously they're suffering. You know, China is suffering right now. Don't forget, they're serving, he serves 4 months in jail, and right now, China is not doing that great. China is going to grow, instead of growing by 5%, they're going to grow by 4%. Don't forget, there's a one child policy in China. So that's not good for them either. And meaning that, and on top of that, they're losing a big customer, and that's not going to be good if they lose the US. So they're kind of forced to deal with the US right now. That's not a good sign. You don't want to coerce someone in doing any kind of deal. You want to negotiate, because if you don't negotiate, you're going to push them to extreme. Be careful, right? Now, suddenly, for some reason, and this is where it gets a little scary. For some reason, now Taiwan is back on in the discussion fray, right? Because on one end, you're pushing China into making a deal with you and forcing them to giving you those rare minerals in exchange for you to, and then you're going to give them a couple of Chinese students. I mean, I don't think that's a big deal. But the point is that you're forcing them, you're coercing China into making a deal. And that's not going to work. China is not going to like that. But they're going to have to, because they're going to feel the growth. Don't forget, there's a lot of Chinese. They are going to lose jobs because of this. They are being impacted. It's going to unstabling the country. That's why they're dealing with the U.S. So what are they giving us, and what are we giving back in return? He's saying, they're going to pay 50%, and we're only going to pay 10. So basically, we won and they lost. That is not a smart way to go about things, okay? And somehow, for some reason, the Taiwan discussion is back in the fray. Now, you should know also that China, if you look at there's a chart, that shows how much business we do with China and how much China is doing business with other. China is doing less and less and less business with the U.S., Europe, and Japan, and is doing more business with the others. So what's happening is the Chinese are not stupid. They see what's happening, right? They realize that, yeah, you want the rare earth so you could build weapons, so you could build all kind of things and make money, right? And you don't want to do this thing that we were doing before, right? Which made us where we are now. I mean, China really took advantage of the situation. Trump saying no more, and I would agree with that. But the way you're going about it, it might be a bit too strong, I mean, a bit too obtuse. So what's going to happen right now is, as we're discussing this deal, we're also bringing Taiwan into the fray, right? Wars have been started for less than that, my friends. The war has been started for less than that. Why? Because you're pushing them into a corner. And whenever someone is pushed into a corner, they will not like it, okay? Now, Chinese share of exports to the US, Europe, and Japan was 50% of their export in 2008. Now it is about 30%. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon channel as well, because what I do for you is I analyze what's going on. I'm not giving you the news. You heard the news about China and the signature. What does it mean for you, right? What do you care? Well, you should care, because if you push China too much in a corner, you may not get the deal that you want. They are dealing with us. They're giving the US 6 months, which you didn't hear that from Trump, but their shares of export to the US, Japan, and Europe has been decreasing, and they've been increasing elsewhere. What do you think China is doing? I mean, if I know it, you could bet that they know. What are they doing? What they're doing, they're essentially replacing us, right? There is a circle in Asia, right, where basically 10% of land mass, but 50% of the population lives there. Correct. 50% of the population lives there. So at some point, they may not want or need to deal with the US anymore. And what are you going to do? Now, what the US is doing, because of the Navarro business, which tends to want to build Fortress America, that wants to build the American empire. Let's force them, because we are big and bad, and you need us. You have to have us. Therefore, you're going to deal with us. This approach by Navarro might not be the smartest. right? Because you're forcing the Chinese and everyone else to buy US and to basically, finance the debt that we have, which is getting larger and larger. These are geopolitical issues. These are very important issues because if it doesn't work, right? If China doesn't get what they want and the US doesn't get what it wants, what do you think is going to happen, right? So you have to make a deal because if you don't make a deal, then you have to make a war. I know, and this is what I was afraid of. I mean, Taiwan is probably going to be the reason why we're going to have a war with China, unfortunately. I mean, it doesn't take much. You just have to go in there and that's it. Now, if you're China, right, you're going to give the US the rare earth so they could build satellite and weapons? Or are you going to say, you know what, I don't think it's going to work, and therefore I'm taking over Taiwan, and let's have it out? Because that's we're heading towards a war with China. And that's my biggest concern because at the end of the day, we'll see what happened to the debt, but those trade negotiations are crazy, and that's what happens when Trump, right, the team Trump, went from the Musk Vance kind of mentality, with the Navarro mentality, which is way, way, way to the right. And basically, that mentality is kick the Chinese out, kick the foreigners out. They could be legal or illegal, right? I mean, the idea of not allowing Chinese students to come here or people from other countries and let's build Fortress America is probably an easier sell, quite frankly. It's easier to sell that to people for them to understand than trying to say, well, why don't we negotiate with Europe? Why don't we try to, pass a tax bill and all these things? And you could see Trump is torn between these two people, these two camps. Let's see who wins out. But usually, it would appear right now that Navarro camps is winning. I mean, imagine, you wrote a deal with 100 countries, and you're trying to deal with 100 countries all together at the same time. I mean, either you're crazy or you think that no, it's going to work because they want to deal with the U.S. They want to make a deal with the U.S. because the U.S. is all powerful, and therefore they have to do it. Now, is that a fact? Is the US, can you do without the US? Let me tell you, my friends, right now, China has been reducing the amount of export to the US, Asia, to US, Europe, and Japan. They're ready to deal with their own, meaning, they're going to deal with India, they're going to deal with Taiwan, they're going to deal with Taiwan and the Philippines, all these countries. These countries have 50% of the people. They may not need the US anymore. Now the thing with the rare minerals is that you need these minerals to build your weapons. Keep in mind that China is able to produce 6 to 7 times more weapons than the US. That's a problem. The US has probably like a couple of days, a week worth of missiles. Right? Now, not so much that I disagree with Trump is trying to do, but the way he's doing it might not be the most efficient. And that's the problem. Because at this point, this is not compatible. I mean, China controls 60 to 70% of the mining of these minerals and 90% the processing capacity. What do you think they've been doing for the past 20 years? They've been into the World Trade Organization. China is ready to go to war. They're going to try to make that deal, but you can't coerce them into making a deal. Right now, that's what you're doing. You're coercing them instead of trying to negotiate. Okay, so now, of course, you will also notice, right, that in the big, beautiful bill, there is about $150 billion for defense. And this is what Elon Musk is saying. Why are we spending so much money on defense? What is the point? You're spending too much money already. You're going to spend more money. That is not how we're going to save money. That is not how it's going to happen. We need to save money. We don't want to go to war with China. Okay? So, and right now, the US has a double deficit. They have a trade deficit and they have the fiscal deficit. And it's at 11%. No countries is able to sustain that level of deficit for too long above 10%, and we're at 11%.